Pivot certainly has been the buzzword. When it comes to generating revenue growth, right now for many, that means identifying entirely new markets. Our sales connections expert, Shari Pash, joins us to talk strategic growth. Hi, Shari.
Hey, Julie, I'm excited to cover this topic today.
Me too, Shari. So I know that many businesses we talk to, many organizations, nonprofits, they're all describing the recovery right now as a means of survival. So let's talk about tapping into new markets. First, how do you identify as an organization a new market?
Like you said, markets are shifting for many businesses right now. So I think to identify that new market, we have to first understand for our customers and our clients, our members, donors, the people we've worked with for years, what has changed for them in their workplace, their operations, their product line, their service line. So I think knowing that it's going to drive where we go with new markets and identifying those new markets. So a couple of things I would say to start with is to think about what's your potential? What's your need client or member segments? And a couple of questions you can ask to do that is, who's doing business with us now? Who's investing with us now? Who isn't that should be? And who do you want to do business with that isn't doing business with you now?
Shari, that's such an important topic because, as you mentioned, so much has changed in the last year with the pandemic. And so there may be people that you were regularly doing business with before that just are not there right now. Maybe they're not coming back.
Right.
And so we really have to start to understand, what does that market look like?
Mm-hmm. And so really with that, that's where we're going to start to talk about creating a client profile, basically a customer profile that you can see where your gaps are and see why you want a new market and where that new market will be. So we want to define that market name or that client segment name. And you want to know currently, do we get business from this segment? What % of our business is from that? So we can decide our growth. Define the type of client that makes up this market. What is the DNA of this particular client customer? Describe where you're going to find this client from. Where are they hanging out at? Basically, are they hanging out in social media? Are they hanging out, in industry events, things like that? So we've got to define where we're going to find these clients from. And what's really important is to know what type of business or revenue they produce. And that's important, right? We've got to know, you're bringing in a lot, it takes a lot of work, but they'll bring in that little revenue versus that large revenue that is so important to sustain a company. So as we look at new markets, we definitely want to look at that.
Yeah, so important, Shari. I know I've heard you say before, as you're talking to people, of course, there's kind of that balance, right? There's the work that maybe you want to be doing or want to be doing more of, because maybe it's an enjoyable product or service that you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to look at that pie chart, because where's the money actually coming from? And right now, when we're in survival mode, that might mean we have to shift what we're doing a little bit, even as we approach these new markets. So what's maybe another tip, Shari? What's another thing like that we should look at?
Well, I think other things you can look at, once you've looked at the revenue that they produce, what's their buy pattern? If you know you've got great business kicking a year off, but you kind of slow in the summer, we want to know that so that as we define these profiles, we may find this market segment or client segment does a lot of business in the summer months, perhaps, or they might be just those who sign a contract for the year with you. But we need to understand, so when you're looking for summer business, you can look through your market segment profiles, your client profiles, and determine which segment is going to allow you to find that summer business. That's just an example. So we want to look at that. We want to know the price that they can tolerate. What revenue can this client segment produce or tolerate? Is this always going to be a low level, but maybe they will buy from you in a really need period for yourself, one of your low periods, and that revenue is good then, right? That lower price.
Right, absolutely. Especially as we're talking survival mode and pandemic and the impact that this has had on all of them. Have you found that could impact pricing and what pricing people will tolerate?
Definitely. People don't have as much money in the checkbook in some industries. Some industries are doing fantastic. So that's where it's so important to go back to knowing what's happening with your clients' industry, their businesses, things like that, because some are thriving during this time. So we don't want to leave money on the table either, right? So as salespeople, it's that fine line of asking those questions and knowing where this particular company or industry segment is, this segment. So that's where it comes to that last one. You want to provide a brief update on the state of this market on your profile sheet so that you do know, has it been hit hard through the pandemic? Is it doing strong? Is it rebounding? Have jobs been lost? They're not going to come back, things like that. So it's really important we create all of these tools or all these fields into our account profile.
Okay, so you've given us so much to work with here. This is a lot of information, a lot of tips. Is there a tool or a system that we can use to help really organize and track and be able to later identify trends?
Yes, because so often we just say, I just want new customers, so I just run out to do it. With this profile, we're going to have a tool on the WLAJ.com website, Julie, so that they can start with that. And it's much easier to start with a tool that you can start to put your strategies into than just staring at that white screen on your computer. So we'll provide that tool to get them started. And based on those profiles, this is where you're going to see your gaps. You're going to be able to identify those new kind of marketing opportunities that you want to go into. So I think that that's really important. And I think with this, it's important you give yourself the planning time, right? You've got to, in
Absolutely.
order to
Yes.
strategize new strategies, you've got to give yourself planning time. 520 work hours in a quarter. How are you using
Yes.
8 of those strategy hours for those other
And
512
we will
hours?
continue to track these topics and talk about these strategies every Monday throughout the year. Shari, thank you so much for sharing your information with us today.
Thanks, Julie.